Hey guys, what's up? It's Mike Lowe, and believe it or not, we are back in MLB The Show. This time, MLB The Show 23. It's been a while, close to 2 years since we've been playing this game together, working on sliders. But I'm really excited to get into this. We have a lot to talk about here in just kind of this intro video. I'll be talking about kind of the franchise I'll be playing and a lot of things like that. And certainly the slider set, which I know a lot of you are curious to see about. But at the end of the day, we are back into the show. I really like what I see overall. It's still not perfect. Of course, there are some things that have just been lingering, kind of legacy issues for me. But I like where the game's gone in the last 2 years. Again, there's some things that I would still like to see with franchise mode and whatnot, but we'll talk about all of that here as we go. But let's just jump in. We got a lot to take a look at here as we examine MLB The Show 23. But first, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. Hit that subscribe button. Check out some of the other videos on the channel. We are always doing simulation style sports gaming here, whether that's NBA 2K, MLB The Show, Madden, golf games. There's tons of other stuff that we're getting into here. Here you're seeing some clips from my Nationals franchise, which we'll be talking about a lot on the channel with MLB The Show. But we got lots going on, and there's lots of other videos on the channel already. So again, check me out on YouTube, check me out on Twitter at MikeLowe47, but let's jump into the video. Well, starting up the game for the first time in a while, it looked pretty similar. I like that a lot of the settings are familiar, and I really like the improvements. I think it's a really interesting thing to take a few years off from a game. If you haven't considered doing it and you've been frustrated with the game, give it a shot, because you will notice some updates, you'll notice some differences, some changes that probably most of you haven't noticed. If you're kind of just going year to year, and overall, I'm happy with it. I like what I'm seeing. I really like the improvements to pitching over the years. I think it's been much harder to throw strikes. Some of you may feel a little bit differently because you've been playing this a little bit more, but I really like the differences. I like kind of the improvements to not just pitching, but also fielding. Still not thrilled with some of the fielding animations and movement, but overall, it feels like a good experience. Hitting's always been pretty solid. It's always kind of felt pretty good. Presentation's been solid, and I like the improvements to presentation, even if it's just kind of just changing up the announcers and some things like that over the year. But overall, pretty good experience, just kind of generally speaking. But we'll be getting into some more specifics here in just a minute. Now, this video is not going to get into the Negro League edition of the game very much. That's going to be in another video I hope to do, but I had to call it out. This mode is awesome. MLB The Show did an amazing job with this. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. It's so well done. A ton of attention was given to this, and it's just really cool to see. Really cool that it's in the game. A super important topic, a super important part of baseball, and I'm just thrilled and just really happy with what they did with it. I guess overall it's nice to see that none of the sliders have changed over the years, so that should make things kind of getting the sliders updated rather easy. I know some folks will be looking for that. This is not the slider video, but just letting you know I am working on it, keeping an eye on things, but overall shouldn't be a huge issue. Really like the default gameplay too, so it's a really good place to start from. Of course, different settings and whatnot, not a ton has changed, so again, this should make it rather straightforward. Not really expecting to see massive differences. Really focused on trying to keep a clean screen for folks. Also trying to really focus on making it hard to throw strikes and making it hard to not walk players. And so, that's just, again, a really, really big focus. It's always been, but it does seem like it's going to be an easier task this year, which I'm really excited about. So yeah, those are just kind of just getting those things out of the way here so we can get a little bit deeper into the video. Just wanted to mention those things. That keep an eye on it and we'll be in good hands. Now, not everything is perfect by any means, and I'm a little disappointed still, or I guess underwhelmed maybe is the better way to put it, just kind of the player profiles, especially when we look at pitchers and their ratings. We still don't have a split rating like we do with hitters versus, like, say, left-handed pitching, I should say, and right-handed pitching. We don't see that same thing. You just have a general hits per nine, Ks per nine. It doesn't differentiate between left and right like they do with hitters. That matters, and not every pitcher is just the exact same. So I was a little bummed to see that. I've been harping for years. I really, really want to see MLB The Show develop more just kind of like personality and character and even just development in general of players. We see some of that with quirks, but we don't see enough with things like, say, team chemistry. More importantly, though, positional learning is something I want to see, especially in the minors. If you draft an 18-year-old who's a stud shortstop and he has no secondary positions, he will be a shortstop forever. There's no way, without editing him, of course, of making him into, say, a third baseman or a second baseman. And so that's just a little bit weird. Not super thrilled here. But, a lot of this looks the same. Just kind of checking out my Tigers here and some sped up video. The ratings seem to match up pretty well. I mean, they've always done a pretty good job kind of, with the default rosters out of the box. I actually never minded those as much as maybe some others. Of course, now riding with MLB The Show, working on rosters officially now. So that's really cool. And they look solid. They look pretty good out of the box, seeing good results in simulations. But again, I just think kind of the character development is something that I would really like to see the show focus on. It sounds like they are focusing on very specific elements of franchise mode kind of as we go. We see a lot of that with scouting this year. It's improved. It's still a little bit wonky. There's elements of it that even remind me of like Madden. But overall, I still think it could be something that could be improved upon. So again, I was just kind of looking through rosters, just seeing what's changed over the years, and really not a ton. You still don't have a super deep minor league system. You still don't have very intelligent CPU when it comes to the management of their roster. So meaning like if a team ends up with no closers, they're just going to have no closers. They'll never move a relief pitcher into a closer spot. Now they might in their actual pitching depth chart, but I'm saying in the actual roster list. And that can matter for things like awards. That can matter for all-star appearances, just the way that the game utilizes the relief pitchers. So that kind of thing does matter. And so it's not terrible, but it's always where I kind of have a gripe when I see MLB The Show winning Sports Game of the year after year. There's an absolute argument for it to win on the field gameplay Game of the Year every year. There's no question. But as far as like overall, it's hard not to think NBA 2K is not more put together overall. And I really hope the show continues to develop franchise mode. I know a lot of us still play it. And I'm just really, really hopeful that we continue to see these improvements here that I'm optimistic about. Again, we've seen some really nice updates with scouting, but they really got to pick up the pace with it, I think. I think baseball needs this. These baseball games need it. And we, as fans of the game, need it. So specifically getting into the franchise mode now, doesn't look a whole lot different a couple years later. I still recommend using two profiles, one for your CPU teams and one for your team. I just go to the default simulation one and just kind of set that how I want and use that for my own. And then I'll just copy it and create a new CPU one where, of course, I just put everything on auto. And that's what you're seeing there on the screen. And then when you go in and start, you can just kind of put all these on. It's actually faster if you default the CPU first, but nonetheless, it takes a couple seconds if you didn't do that. And that's all I'm doing here is just updating the CPU teams to be CPU, and then I'll leave my team as simulation, which I have tweaked. I turned Fantasy Draft on only because I like to generate fictional pictures of the real life players so that they match kind of the future players that come into the league through the draft and so on. If you start a fantasy draft and just back out, that will do that for you, or at least it used to in the past. And so, but really franchise hasn't changed a whole lot. There are still a lot of things here that we need to do. Rest assured, I'm not a big fan of using 30 team control, but it's kind of necessary in this game to really manage the CPU's bullpen, keep those guys out of the long relief role, which I'll talk about later, and just do some other things, making sure that the teams have, say, like 3 closers throughout the year at different levels of the minors and at the major league level, and just some other hand-holding that we unfortunately need to do. Now, one of the first things I was doing is really just testing out some of the, I guess, long simulation tests, specifically just simming a regular season. And so that's what you're seeing here. We're looking at things like bullpen usage, starting pitching usage. We're looking at things like the number of trades. We're looking at the number of injuries, and really just looking to see how that all balances. As I said before, I really feel like the default injuries slider should be around 7, but because you're only having really 2 functional minor league teams, you're probably safer to leave that around 6. And that's where I have it right now, at least for both simulated and played games, is at 6. But again, pretty early in my franchise still. So anyway, I'm just ripping through the season here, just looking at doing those tests. And this is kind of where a lot of the slider stuff will start for me, is actually outside of gameplay. Because I want to just kind of get like that core set up around just getting some of the kind of peripherals set properly, because, you know, you're one team, but there's 29 CPU teams. And so I like to kind of start from there make sure that we're getting them balanced. And then from there, we can start to kind of use that as a frame of reference when we actually get into your games. And so here we are at the end of the season. And of course, what I'm looking at, we have a lot of teams that, as most of you probably know, have these long relief spots filled. And what's happening is this, the CPU is not utilizing setup pitchers as much. You can see 175 innings there, by 135 innings pitched, 167, 150. As I flip through, you can see the number of innings that these long relievers are getting. And then you have Iglesias, an 86 overall, is only getting 44 innings pitched. That matters tremendously. And that's been an issue for a number of years. I mean, at least close to half a decade in this game. It needs to be fixed. I cannot state this more clearly to anyone listening who has the ability to make that happen. It needs to be fixed. It's a really bad look, especially in a baseball game where stats matter tremendously. Now, we can handle this because we can manually, and I literally do this after every game, I go through each team and I move anyone out of the long relief spot, and I either fill that last MRP spot or the setup spot that's vacated. It's a little harder now because some teams are carrying 13 pitches, but you can at least do your best. You can also even hide injured players in long relief because they won't use them. Even if they're just day-to-day injuries, they won't use those pitchers. So that's another way too. And it helps. It doesn't make it perfect, but you'll get it into that like 85, 90% clean version, which is far better than just not managing this at all. So again, super important to keep an eye on that. And that's kind of what I'm doing here, is just looking around at the bullpens of the leagues. I'm just looking at innings pitched really more than anything. And of course, we're seeing a huge discrepancies. The game does an okay job with closers. It's not terrible. They'll use those in pretty realistic situations, at least when we consider like a traditional closer. But setup pitchers are way underutilized. Even your better middle relief pitchers are way underutilized. And perhaps worst of all, these long relievers, which are usually not very good pitchers. They're guys you put in like when the game's have been blown up, you're losing 8-0 or something like that. Those guys are getting way too many injuries, and it's a huge problem in this game. Does it ruin the game? No, because you can work around it, but again, it's an issue. So here we're looking at, again, injuries. This is with it at 6. You can see we have a pretty good number of injuries throughout the league after the season. But to me, it should still be a little bit more. But as I've said, it's a little bit tricky when you only have 2 levels of minors. You can run out of players and it'll create some problems. So I think 6 is probably a good place for us to at least start with injuries. Now, of course, we can start to look a little bit deeper at how the stats look when we start to look at team rankings. And what I obsess over a little bit here is going to be complete games and then shutouts. It also kind of ties into a lot of that innings pitch that we talked about just a little bit ago. But really, most of the engine, the game simulation engine works pretty well. It's actually really good. But the areas it struggles with, again, bullpen usage, starting pitcher hook, which of course is meaning like when a starting pitcher comes out of the game. And so that absolutely needs to be manipulated from default. And so that's kind of what I was looking at on those screens. Here, we're basically looking around at just some of the different transactions, injuries, how our team's utilizing it, and it hasn't really changed a whole lot. You still don't see enough, in my opinion, call-ups based on performance in this game. It's usually from just injuries and that sort of thing. Maybe at the end of the month they will. What I do like seeing is that teams are signing free agents. Now, maybe that was in last year's game. I didn't play it. But that's really nice to see because that would never happen. That used to be one of my house rules. Don't sign any free agents during the season. The CPU teams won't, but now they will. Very cool. I'm not going to talk too much about like the quality of trades. That's a whole other discussion, a whole other video. But I think the number of trades that we're seeing in franchise seem pretty realistic. It seems more, and this is just that default 5 for the slider. I even like to see the activity kick up around the All-Star, or I should say the trade deadline, which of course is the end of July. And so that's pretty cool to see. Again, the accuracy of trades and whatnot, that's always going to be up for debate. We just don't know. We see trades in real life that don't make a lot of sense. And so I don't really lose too much sleep over it. To me, it's all based on numbers. This is how a game's coded. It makes sense somewhere in the code, and I'm okay with that because, like I said, there are real life trades that just don't make a ton of sense that we've all seen. And so again, overall, I think the trade engine's doing a decent job. I don't see major problems with it, especially when we consider the number of minor league teams that we have, which aren't very many. Seems to be working just fine. But again, we can tinker with that as we go. That's something we'll get into the sliders a little bit later on. So we're going to continue to look around at that season I simulated. But first, Just some other things that I just haven't really been impressed with, not getting any attention. I mean, these different goals and whatnot seem a little ridiculous. Expecting the Tigers to finish over 500. It's the same thing with my Nationals, who are probably the worst team in baseball history, potentially. Expecting them to finish above 500 seems ridiculous, even as a goal. Give me some actual developmental goals. Give me some financial goals like we're seeing here. Maybe there's something that could be done there for the owner to maybe kind of start bankrolling some things for the future. But, overall, we're just not seeing a ton of improvements here. As far as the season turning out, not too many surprises or anything. If you're curious, this is just kind of the first simulation I did and recorded. So I thought I'd share that. But again, it's kind of what you'd expect to see. And again, the simulation engine does a pretty good job overall. This is not a critique of that at all. I would certainly put it in kind of that B+ range as far as like a simulation engine goes, which I think is solid. Award winners looked realistic. This screen, it looks nice. It hasn't been updated in years. Maybe an award show would be cool. I mean, just something. And I understand that the show team seems like they're kind of just working on, maybe one element at a time or whatever to make it deeper as they go into franchise. But come on, there's just more can be done, just period. And however it's sliced, this game makes enough money that more can be done with it. And so I'm hoping that we continue to see that, because I do like the updates to scouting that we've seen, which we'll talk about more and certainly in other videos. But I think overall, it's still not enough to warrant this is what we did all year and that's it. That to me is just not giving enough attention to franchise mode, period. Whatever that means for them, it's just not getting enough attention. So hoping to see more of that. But again, overall, just kind of looking, what I'm looking at here is, again, the way the game's using closers as opposed to real life stats. And so if you needed to go back and kind of look at what I was doing there, that's what we're seeing. And again, just looking at kind of the realistic statistical output of, say, different award winners and things like that, whether they're Rookie of the Year, MVP. And again, engine holds up pretty well outside of innings pitched, outside of kind of the way the bullpen is being used by these teams. So, but still a little stale, even 2 years later. I was surprised to be like, oh, wow, this looks exactly the same from MLB The Show 21. As far as online leagues go, I mean, I like kind of the direction they've gone with this. I just wish it got more attention. I really think this could be something cool that they showcase. We get all these stupid splash screens for Diamond Dynasty and these stupid roster updates or whatever. Who cares? Why don't you showcase some really cool leagues? Why don't you have an official league like NBA 2K? Do some different things. Give us some more flexibility in this. Help commissioners maybe promote their leagues, get them out into the open, get them out on the Twitter, and things like that. I think they could do a lot of different stuff here. So it's a feature I want to use. I think it's cool, but it just needs major TLC here. It has a lot of potential, and I get it. Nobody wants to play in a 162 game season, but San Diego Studios, work with us. Let's come up with something together that can work. Get involved, let us get involved, and we can make a strong team with that. Earlier, I mentioned relationships, and part of that comes into how the coaching staff works in this game, or perhaps doesn't work in this game. This has not been changed. This has not been updated, and I think it's poorly done. I don't really see the benefit of all your coaching staff does is just add little -2s, -3s, +3, +1 at just various things. I mean, to an extent, I guess that's what coaching can do, but it just seems really, really bland, and it could be so much more when we talk about relationship building. I've talked about this before in other videos, but having things like a catcher influence a pitching staff. Why isn't there a quirk like that for different coaches? And we could go on and on. That's a whole other video. But again, coaching is pretty underwhelming. Same thing with scouting. Even though there's been updates here, it's just not super impressive. It's just not enough to really warrant it being oh, wow, cool. It's certainly better than it was, but it still just needs a little more TLC. And again, we're going to get into more of the scouting stuff in some other videos. But training, I've mentioned before, this is really one of my top things. This might be my top thing I talked about, of just not having the ability to teach a player a position. And I'm not saying I want to teach Miguel Cabrera to play shortstop at age 39, but you should be able to work with younger players who have maybe a good work ethic, maybe players who have a certain intelligence level. They should be able to do more with that. But unfortunately, we're just not seeing that, and I really think it's a big need for this game. I mean, think how cool it would be too, even like in Diamond Dynasty, if you could do that within reason. Throwing it out there too as just a total aside, I really wish they would bring back fictional Diamond Dynasty leagues. That's how it first started. I loved it. I thought it was really cool. But this is an area that needs updating by the show. Hopefully we'll see that next year. Now, it should come as no surprise that when it comes to gameplay and graphics, MLB The Show is just, it's one of the best, if not the best. It's certainly in the argument when we're just talking about the play on the field. And it's no surprise this year's game, again, awesome. I could make multiple videos just talking about the pros of gameplay and whatnot. It just feels good. It feels very realistic. It feels clean. It sounds good. I mean, just really, again, I mean, it's certainly in that A range for me. And when we just kind of look at general gameplay, I think they do a really good job of balancing the various players who are into this game. Someone like me who's very, very simulation oriented is okay with the game taking longer, taking pitches, and really just kind of enjoying kind of the slow burn of a baseball game, but also appealing to people who want to just get in and kind of mash and just relieve some stress after work and that kind of thing. And that's hard. It's hard for a game studio to balance that. And so I think they've done a really nice job. One of the big improvements I've noticed, at least, is the way you can pull a ball. And this is on default legend. And I'm pulling a ton of balls here. Not always great swings, but just pulling the ball instead of being late on everything. And that feels really good. That may come just from me playing a lot of Super Mega Baseball the last year and a half or so, and where you have to swing a lot sooner. But I love seeing this. I love seeing it on default legend too. Very, very cool. Another thing that I've kind of picked up from Super Mega Baseball is the ability to field fly balls without a cursor. This is something that some of you will like, some of you won't like. It's just really up to you. I have kind of the slider set that I'll be sharing with the public set to have that on so you can see it, but I will be playing with it off. At least for now, and we'll just kind of see how it goes. It takes a little practice though, but yeah, again, gameplay really, really well done. Of course, the animations, graphics, I mean, it always has. It's always played really well. It looks great. We wouldn't be playing this game. We wouldn't be playing this game years later if that wasn't the case. So, for all the stuff we kind of talked about earlier, again, the gameplay, what more needs to be said? It's just really well done. And this is not the video if we're going over that. There's tons of other videos on YouTube that do this. I do like a lot of the graphical improvements. And again, a lot of these aren't new. So I can say I like these, but they get repetitive, as a lot of you know. And these new ones, at least they're new to me because I didn't play last year. These will start to get a little bit repetitive. But I like the attention to this. This is the sort of stuff we need to see in franchise. So I definitely wanted to call these out. I think the replays in this game look great. They especially look great because of just how gorgeous the stadiums look. The stadiums in this game are by far the best. They're better than FIFA. They're better than Madden. They just look awesome. And you really get to kind of see that showcase, whether it's in the background of a shot like that, or of course just these beautiful panoramics that we get at sunset in Comerica Park and so on. They just look phenomenal. I mean, it's just, and of course the stadium creator is such a cool feature there too, that we haven't even talked about. So that's a lot. It really didn't have a specific agenda for this video. This is not a game review, but just really saying, hey, we're back. I'm excited to be playing MLB The Show 23 with you all. I'm excited to be working on sliders and playing through a franchise. So if you want to see more videos like this, certainly more videos with my franchise with the Nationals, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I'm also on Twitter at MikeLowe47. And I super appreciate you all getting involved, asking questions and that sort of thing. So be on the lookout for the sliders. Be on the lookout for more franchise. I will talk to you all next time.